Hello there and welcome. My name's Karin Del Maestro. Pull up a seat, get cozy, get comfortable. Perhaps you're listening on the go, that's okay too. But I invite you to join me and to pay attention over the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, because I'm going to be sharing my absolute best tips with you to help you stay calm in not just the month of October, but let's be real, your entire life. Okay. If we haven't yet met, I am your health, your transformation, and your calmness coach. I'm also a breast cancer and BRCA2 thriver. I'll be talking about that more as we go through this series. But I want to jump right in here today. We're going to be talking about recognizing your triggers, not just why we're triggered or what a trigger might look like for you, but also how you might react to those triggers, right? So we're going to be talking about all of that and diving into that in this episode today. So let's jump right in and talk about why are we triggered? Why are we even triggered? Now, you may be familiar with that word triggered. You might recognize it as a big reaction to something that might not feel afterwards that it was worthy of that reaction. You might realize that too. But we are often triggered after we've been through any kind of trauma. And what you may not yet realize is that going through breast cancer and hearing those words, for me, they were spine-chilling words on a date that will forever be branded on my forehead. When you hear those words, you have breast cancer. That is a trauma in that instant, in that instant. And there's actually an amazing statistic that 82.5% of breast cancer survivors suffer from PTSD, but we are rarely advised of that. We rarely realize that. And that's why I wanted to talk about this first in this series, because when you start to recognize when you're being triggered, how you're reacting, then you get the control to start doing something different. And that's going to help you as you go through this month. So what happens when we're triggered is, and you may have heard of this, right? You might have heard of survival mode. And literally, for most of us, as we've gone through breast cancer, we have been in survival mode, doing what it takes to get through treatment, whatever that might look like for you. And all of our journeys are different, whether it's a lumpectomy, double mastectomy, any kind of surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and then afterwards, maybe hormone blocking therapy, any kind of infusion or injection. There's so many treatments out there. But while you're going through that, you might be feeling like, oh, I'm just going from this appointment to this appointment to this appointment to this appointment. And what happens during that time so often, you don't even really have time to catch our breath, right? We're just going. We're doing what we've got to do. We've pulled up our big girl panties and we're like, yep, show me the way. I'll do it. It sucks. I don't like it, but I'll do it. I know I felt that way too. And that's why so often when treatment ends, it's like we've hit a brick wall. Suddenly, all of the emotions flooding, suddenly, all of the exhaustion, like bone aching exhaustion, can hit us at that point. Often we're not prepared for that. I know I certainly wasn't. So, this is why we might get triggered, because so many of us have our bodies, our subconscious, have recognized this trauma that we've been through. It may not be a conscious thought. So understand that you may not feel that way consciously, but our body knows, because our body keeps the score. Our body knows. And when we get triggered specifically, and especially during the month of October, for those of you diagnosed with breast cancer, or perhaps a loved one that's been diagnosed, a trigger for you might look like seeing the color pink everywhere, right? Pink ribbons. It might be a smell. You know, if you ever felt your anxiety kind of increase and get sweaty and maybe a hot flash as you walk into your doctor's office or a hospital. It might be a taste of something, maybe a taste that you remember tasting in your mouth as you were going through chemotherapy or when you've had scans. And aside from that, it could be somebody diagnosed on a TV show. I can't tell you how many shows I don't watch anymore because of cast members being diagnosed with breast cancer. There was a time where I couldn't handle it. It was a time where it felt too much. And what I know now is I was being triggered in those instances. You may be experiencing something similar. It could be a comment, some kind of flippant comment from a well-meaning friend who's trying to encourage you and be positive, but doesn't realize that something like, well, at least you get a free boob job, is not how you're feeling. And in fact, that feels, it may or may not feel to you, but I know to me, when somebody said that to me, that wasn't how I was feeling at all. There was nothing free about the experience that I was going through. And especially during October, hats, t-shirts, TV commercials, local events, it's in your face. And what I know about breast cancer, and I was diagnosed in 2018, I'm recording this now in 2023, but for me, I can remember just wanting to stick my head in the sand through October. I can remember thinking, just let me know when November comes. And then unfortunately for me too, my trauma was compounded in October when I lost my brother in 2019 in October as well. So often for me, October has been a challenging month. Now, you might be feeling challenged by it. You may also, and by the way, you can have both of these things. You may also be feeling grateful and blessed that you're here to see another October, that you're grateful for the awareness that October can bring to this disease, a disease that every 19 seconds in the world, somebody is being diagnosed with. We need help. We need help for research, for treatment, for early detection. And we need that for sure. But it's how we choose to navigate this month or any other situation that's making you feel traumatized that we're talking about here, right? We're focusing on the things that we can control. It's a biggie. So let's talk about, we've talked about why we might be triggered. We've talked about what a trigger might look like for you. And it may be other things that I haven't mentioned. There's no right, there's no wrong here. Your trigger is your trigger. Now, let's talk about how you might react to being triggered. Because for me, this was a game changer when I started to recognize this for me. Because then I could start to see what I wanted to do when I was triggered. Now, historically for me, and you might have heard of fight or flight. Well, there are two others, freeze and fawn. I'm just going to talk about them briefly with you. I go into them in depth in some of my workshops, but how you might react. Now, for me, freeze, isolating. I get an automatic pull to go into the bedroom, snuggle up under the covers and watch Friends on repeat with a nice cup of tea. That's my reaction. That's what I want to do. You might try to control everything, which is a fight response, along with anger outbursts and being irritable and like snappy at people, right? You might go into flight, which is a lot of perfectionism and OCD and overthinking and anxiety. Other freeze responses might be procrastinating, feeling stuck. It might be behaviors that help to numb yourself. So for me, my reaction is, oh, let me go to the, let me go into bed and snuggle up with my coziest blanket. Yours might be, let me go reach for some ice cream or pour another glass of wine or give me those whole bag of chocolate chip cookies. It might also be exercise. It could be numbing yourself with medications. It could be sex, if you can tolerate it after breast cancer. I know many of us, I'm okay and I'm grateful for it, but I know many of us, it's something that can be a big struggle. And then the final one, fawn, F-A-W-N. I'm just spelling it because I know my accent is tough here. But often, this is one that we will talk about more as we go through this month, but you start to fawn over others, right? Having no boundaries. And we'll talk about boundaries in our next episode. But kind of not knowing who you are. So your identity is wrapped up in what you do for everybody else. And so if you're feeling triggered, you're not even going inward, you're not reflecting. You might tend to just say, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? What needs to be done? And that might be your response. Now, what do we do with all of that? What do we do with all of that? Simply recognize. That's it. That's it. Because that recognition, that shift to being aware, that alone will help you understand when you're being triggered, why you might be reacting the way that you are. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. When we are having these, and these are automatic trauma responses, they are stored in our body and they are stored in our subconscious and they just happen. And so I wanted to kick off this series with this episode, and it's a little longer than the others might be because I wanted to share with you this information to help you navigate this month and continuing in life. Like, this doesn't just stop at October. These tools will help you forever. I want you to know that I invite you, please, to be kind to yourself. This is not about judging yourself or beating yourself up or saying, I should be over this by now. It doesn't happen that way. I wish it did. I wish there were a switch that we could flip. But as somebody that has been through multiple major traumas, a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of starting over, I can vouch that when you start to be kind to yourself, that's when you can start to recover and get on a calmer path. So my invitation to you is to simply recognize when you're being triggered, what that is for you, so that you can be around it less often. We'll talk about that more tomorrow with setting boundaries. Okay, just recognize. That's your little tip for today. And I invite you now to place your left hand on top of your heart, your right hand on top of that, just gently, like you're holding your heart in your hand. And we're going to be ending every episode like this because this activity has been a game changer for my clients. It's been such a huge shift in helping them to feel safe. In a world where so often we haven't been, and I know going through breast cancer just adds a whole ton of uncertainty onto that. So taking in a breath. And I invite you to close your eyes, not if you're driving, please. If you're listening to this while you're driving, you can do this activity when you're somewhere safe and you've pulled over. And as you repeat after me these words, I invite you to think of yourself as your 10-year-old self, as a little girl, or perhaps a little boy, wanting to hear these words so badly. And I want you to know that you can share these words, these emotions, these feelings with yourself to help you feel calm. So repeat after me, either out loud or in your head. But I want you to really send this emotion, send these feelings, send these words to your 10-year-old self. You are loved. You are safe. I've got you. I love you. And if this brings up emotion for you, allow the emotion to come. It's part of a trauma release. It can often be the first time in our life that we've even heard those words or felt them the way that we want to feel them. Okay, thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.